Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from chapter Hare Krishna.
After the reading.
The mic isn't on, but is it? I can use a loud voice. Oh, okay.
It's still saying both off. Should I just turn it off? Just turn both. I put it at the noise.
This seems fun. This is okay.
Okay, I can off that.
This one's okay, Maharaj, because it's not blowing directly at you. Chapter 75. Why Duryodhana felt insulted at the end of the Rajasuya sacrifice. King Yudhishthir was known as Ajata Shatru, or a person who had no enemy. Therefore, when all the men, demigods, kings, sages, and saints saw the successful termination of the Rajasuya Yajna performed by King Yudhishthir, they were very happy. That Duryodhana alone was unhappy was astonishing to Maharaj Parikshit, and therefore he requested Shukadev Goswami to explain this. Shukadev Goswami said, "My dear Parikshit, my dear King Parikshit, your grandfather King Yudhishthir was a great soul. His congenial disposition attracted everyone to be his friend, and therefore he was known as Ajata Shatru, one who never created an enemy. He engaged all the members of the Kuru dynasty in taking charge of different departments for the management of the Rajasuya sacrifice. For example, Bhimsen was put in charge of the kitchen department, Duryodhana in charge of the treasury department, Sahadeva in charge of the reception department, Nakula in charge of the store department, and Arjuna in charge of looking after the comforts of the elder persons. The most astonishing feature was that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, took charge of washing the feet of all the incoming guests. The queen, the goddess of fortune Draupadi, was in charge of administering the distribution of food, and because Karna was famous for giving charity, he was put in charge of the charity department. In this way, Satyaki, Vikarna, Hardikya, Vidura, Santardana, and Bhurishava, the son of Bahlika, were all engaged in different departments for managing the affairs of the Rajasuya sacrifice. They were all so bound in loving affection for King Yudhishthir that they simply wanted to please him. After Shishupal died by the mercy of Lord Krishna and merged into the spiritual existence, and after the end of the Rajasuya Yajna, when all the friends, guests, and well-wishers had been sufficiently honored and rewarded, King Yudhishthir went to bathe in the Ganges. The city of Hastinapur stands today on the bank of the Jamuna, and the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam that King Yudhishthir went to bathe in the Ganges indicates, therefore, that during the time of the Pandavas, the river Jamuna was also known as the Ganges. While the king was taking the Avabhrita bath, different musical instruments vibrated, such as mridangas, conch shells, parnava drums, kettle drums, and bugles, and the ankle bells of the dancing girls jingled. Many groups of professional singers sang as veenas, flutes, gongs, and cymbals were played, and thus a tumultuous sound vibrated in the sky. The princely guests from many kingdoms like Srinjaya, Kamboja, Kuru, Kaike, and Koshala were present with their different flags and gorgeously decorated elephants, chariots, horses, and soldiers. All of them passed in a procession with King Yudhishthir in the forefront. The executive members who had performed the sacrifice, the priests, religious ministers, and brahmanas, all loudly chanted the Vedic hymns. The demigods and inhabitants of Pitriloka and Gandharvaloka, as well as many sages, showered flowers from the sky. The men and women of Hastinapur or Indraprastha, their bodies smeared with scents and floral oils, were nicely decorated in colorful garments and decorated with garlands, jewels, and ornaments. Enjoying the ceremony, they threw on one another liquid substances like water, oil, milk, butter, and yogurt. Some even smeared these on each other's bodies. In this way, they enjoyed the occasion. The professional prostitutes jubilantly smeared these liquid substances on the bodies of the men, and the men reciprocated in the same way. All the liquid substances had been mixed with turmeric and saffron, and their color was a lustrous yellow. In order to observe the great ceremony, many wives of the demigods had come in different airplanes, and they were visible in the sky. Similarly, the queens of the royal family, gorgeously decorated and surrounded by bodyguards, arrived on different palanquins. During this time, Lord Krishna, the maternal cousin of the Pandavas, and his special friend Arjuna were both throwing the liquid substances on the bodies of the queens. The queens became bashful, but at the same time their beautiful smiling brightened their faces. Because of the liquids thrown on their bodies, the saris covering them became completely wet. The different parts of their beautiful bodies, particularly their breasts and their waists, became partially visible because of the wet cloth. The queens brought buckets of the same liquid substances and with syringes sprinkled them on the bodies of their brothers-in-law. As they engaged in such jubilant activities, their hair fell loose, and the flowers decorating their bodies began to fall. When Lord Krishna, Arjuna, and the queens were thus engaged in these jubilant activities, persons who were not clean in heart were agitated by lustful desires. In other words, such behavior between pure males and females is enjoyable, but it makes persons who are materially contaminated become lustful. King Yudhishthir, in a gorgeous chariot yoked to excellent horses, was present there along with his queens, including Draupadi, and their features were so beautiful that it appeared as if the great Rajasuya sacrifice were standing there in person, along with the different functions of the sacrifice. Following the Rajasuya sacrifice, there was the Vedic ritualistic duty known as Patni Samyaj. This sacrifice, which one performs along with one's wife, was also duly conducted by the priests of King Yudhishthir. As Queen Draupadi and King Yudhishthir were taking their Avabhrita bath, the citizens of Hastinapur, as well as the demigods, began to beat on drums and blow trumpets out of feelings of happiness, and there was a shower of flowers from the sky. When the king and the queen finished their bath in the Ganges, all the other citizens, consisting of all the Varnas or castes, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, took their bath in the Ganges. Bathing in the Ganges is recommended in the Vedic literature because by such bathing one is freed from all sinful reactions. This is still current in India, especially at particularly auspicious moments. At such times, millions of people bathe in the Ganges. After taking his bath, King Yudhishthir, dressed in a new silken cloth and wrapper, decorated himself with valuable jewelry. The king not only dressed himself and decorated himself, but also gave clothing and ornaments to all the priests and the others who had participated in the yagyas. In this way, he worshipped them all. He constantly worshipped his friends, his family members, his relatives, his well-wishers, and everyone present. And because he was a Vaishnava, a great devotee of Lord Narayan, he knew how to treat everyone well. The Mayavadi philosophers endeavored to see everyone as God. Their endeavor to see everyone as God is an artificial attempt at oneness, but a Vaishnava or a devotee of Lord Narayana sees every living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, a Vaishnava's treatment of other living entities is on the absolute platform, as one cannot treat one part of his body differently from another part because they all belong to the same body. A Vaishnava does not see a human being as distinct from an animal, because in both he sees the soul and the supersoul seated together. When everyone was refreshed after bathing and was dressed in silken clothing with jeweled earrings, flower garlands, turbans, long wrappers, and pearl necklaces, they looked altogether like the demigods from heaven. This was especially true of the women, who were very nicely dressed. Each wore a golden belt around the waist. They were all smiling, with spots of tilak and curling hair scattered here and there. This combination was very attractive. Those persons who had participated in the Rajasuya sacrifice, including the most cultured priests, the Brahmanas who had assisted, the citizens of all the Varnas, and the kings, demigods, sages, saints, and citizens of Pitriloka, were all very much satisfied by the dealings of King Yudhishthir, and at the end they happily departed for their residences. While returning to their homes, they talked of the dealings of King Yudhishthir, and even after continuous talk of his greatness, they were not satiated, just as one may drink nectar over and over again and never be satisfied. After the departure of all the others, Maharaj Yudhishthir restrained the inner circle of his friends, including Lord Krishna, not allowing them to leave. Lord Krishna could not refuse the request of the king. Krishna therefore sent back all the heroes of the Yadu dynasty, Samba, and others. All of them returned to Dwaraka, and Lord Krishna personally remained to give pleasure to the king. In the material world, everyone has a particular type of desire to be fulfilled, but one is never able to fulfill his desires to his full satisfaction. But King Yudhishthir, because of his unflinching devotion to Krishna, could fulfill all his desires successfully by the performance of the Rajasuya sacrifice. From the description of the Rajasuya Yajna, such a function appears to be a great ocean of opulent desires. Such an ocean is not possible for an ordinary man to cross. Nevertheless, by the grace of Lord Krishna, King Yudhishthir was able to cross it very easily, and thus he became freed from all anxieties. When Duryodhana saw that Maharaj Yudhishthir had become very famous after performing the Rajasuya Yajna and was fully satisfied in every respect, he began to burn with the fire of envy, because his mind was always poisonous. For one thing, he envied the imperial palace constructed by the demon Maya for the Pandavas. The palace was excellent in its puzzling artistic workmanship and was befitting the position of great princes, kings, or leaders of the demons. In that great palace, the Pandavas lived with their family members, and Queen Draupadi served her husbands very peacefully. And because in those days Lord Krishna was also there, the palace was also decorated by his thousands of queens. When the queens, with their heavy breasts and thin waists, moved within the palace, and their ankle bells rang very melodiously with their movement, the whole palace appeared more opulent than the heavenly kingdom. Because a portion of their breasts was sprinkled with saffron powder, the pearl necklaces on their breasts appeared reddish. With their beautiful earrings and flowing hair, the queens appeared very attractive. After seeing such beauties in the palace of King Yudhishthir, Duryodhana was envious. He was especially envious and lustful upon seeing the beauty of Draupadi, because he had cherished a special attraction for her from the very beginning of her marriage with the Pandavas. In the marriage selection assembly of Draupadi, Duryodhana had also been present, and along with other princes, he had been very much captivated by the beauty of Draupadi, but he had failed to achieve her. Once upon a time, King Yudhishthir was sitting on his golden throne in the palace constructed by the demon Maya. His 4 brothers and other relatives, as well as his great well-wisher, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were present, and the material opulence of King Yudhishthir seemed no less than that of Lord Brahma. When he was sitting on the throne surrounded by his friends, and the reciters were offering prayers to him in the form of nice songs, Duryodhana came to the palace with his younger brothers. Duryodhana was decorated with a helmet, and he carried a sword in his hand. He was always in an envious and angry mood, and therefore on a slight provocation he spoke sharply with the doorkeepers and became angry. By the craftsmanship of the demon Maya, the palace was so decorated in different places that one who did not know the tricks would consider water to be land and land to be water. Duryodhana was illusioned by this craftsmanship, and when crossing water, thinking it to be land, he fell in. When Duryodhana, out of his foolishness, had thus fallen, the queens enjoyed the incident by laughing. King Yudhishthir could understand the feelings of Duryodhana, and he tried to restrain the queens. But Lord Krishna indicated that King Yudhishthir should not refrain them from enjoying the incident. Krishna desired that Duryodhana would be fooled in that way, and that all of them enjoy his foolish behavior. When everyone laughed, Duryodhana felt very insulted, and his bodily hairs stood up in anger. Being thus insulted, he immediately left the palace, bowing his head. He was silent and did not protest. When Duryodhana left in such an angry mood, everyone regretted the incident, and King Yudhishthir also was very sorry. But despite all these occurrences, Krishna was silent. He did not say anything against or in favor of the incident. It appeared that Duryodhana had been put into illusion by the supreme will of Lord Krishna, and this was the beginning of the enmity between the two sects of the Kuru dynasty. This appeared to be part of Krishna's plan in his mission to decrease the burden of the world. King Parikshit had inquired from Shukadeva Goswami why Duryodhana was not satisfied after the termination of the great Rajasuya sacrifice, and thus it was explained by Shukadeva Goswami. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 75th chapter of Krishna, why Duryodhana felt insulted at the end of the Rajasuya sacrifice.
Thank you very much. Om Ajnana Timirantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadhati Shapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jatapatakamanan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savatutam Prijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Ladita Sri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagadpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Holi Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The Rajasuya sacrifice has been completed, and we're hearing, first we hear how different persons were put in charge of different departments for the Rajasuya Yajna. This is management, seeing who's meant for which duty. And the final ceremony was the performance of the Avabritya bath in the Ganges, or the Jamuna. And there were dancing girls and singers, and quite the celebration. And there's some smearing of liquid substances on bodies of the men and women, which in this exalted company didn't lead to lustful desires. Then there's a sacrifice well, another ritualistic duty, Patni Sanyaj. And everyone is gorgeously decorated and so on. Yudhisthira Maharaj pleased all the different people of different castes and his own relatives and friends. And Yudhisthira Maharaj, everyone was glorifying him. Krishna stayed back some days to please Yudhisthira Maharaj. And Duryodhana now comes in. He was envious, he was angry. This is the demonic mentality. If someone else is happy, then they're unhappy. If someone else has something, then the envious person is sorry that why should he have what I don't have. He was envious of the Pandavas because of their wife, Draupadi, and he was envious of their gorgeous palace constructed by the demon Maya. It's related how he was confused by the craftsmanship. In this palace, there were places where there was land, but it seemed like water, and there was water that seemed like land. So Duryodhana got confused and wound up falling in the water and being laughed at by the queens. So he was humiliated. He was humiliated. And Draupadi also laughed. Yudhisthira Maharaj tried to sort the situation out, and didn't want Duryodhana to be made foolish looking, didn't want him further humiliated. But Krishna mysteriously went along and didn't intervene. He allowed it to go on. And it seemed, and this was, as Srila Prabhupada comments, part of Krishna's plan for decreasing the burden of the world. All right. Are there some comments or some questions?
Well, if nobody else has, I was curious when we understand, these activities, the sporting of young boys and young girls. I didn't quite understand that there's no lust. I understand that there's no lust there.
I've puzzled over this for 40 years.
Oh, okay.
It appears to be like the typical Bollywood wet sari scene.
Yeah.
But This is how it's described. These jubilant activities were going on, and yet there was a kind of innocence in their mentality. They weren't succumbing to gross lusty desires. They're elevated people. The gross person, as soon as there's anything, I'll give you an example. I was in Logan Airport, Boston, Massachusetts, to catch an early morning flight, very early. And I wasn't quite sure which direction I was supposed to be going in to catch my plane. And so I stopped an airport worker of some sort, and he was directing me. And while he was directing me, a woman walked by, like a businesswoman. Clack, 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 loud heels. And the guy went like this. And then he, did you see that? And she was an ordinary businesswoman with a dress. And, she had a body like most women do, but there was nothing spectacular or special. But did you see that? Just the very sight of a woman early in the morning was enough to have his head spinning. So this is the gross mentality. You can only imagine, how many women are walking through that airport and what that man's neck is like by the time he gets off work. In any case, so this sort of gross mentality is there, especially in Kali Yuga. It's by bad association, with the modes of ignorance and passion. An innocent boy becomes educated in lusty mentality. An innocent girl becomes similarly educated. But in this exalted company, they didn't have this base mentality. That's about as far as I can take.
By analogy, could we say that when there's...
we need, if the men would move up here and make a path so that the ladies can come through.
When there's
we have some extra space here. Hare Krishna.
When there's a sporting event with kshatriyas, generally the competitive spirit reaches a height, the very competitive. But I suppose if you're in sort of an exalted, congenial association, you could have these sporting events without it reaching a point of competitiveness. Maybe it's...
Well, no, they were competitive, but we read that they would compete like anything. And then at night they would invite one another to their respective camps, and they would talk and joke and feast and so on, and everybody would be friends. And then the next morning they would go out and kill one another again.
So it seems like these people of this age were able to sort of turn off these lower tendencies.
So it seems.
Thank you much.
Hare Krishna. Yes. Hare Krishna. Yeah, it seems good. No, now it's not good.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, that's perfect. So just trying to revisit the statement that it's part of Krishna's plan in his mission to decrease the burden of the world. What do we mean by this burden? Is it eliminating the bad? Because this very incident triggered Duryodhana getting humiliated. It triggered a whole chain of events which led to the...
Kurukshetra.
Yeah.
The Kurukshetra was also Krishna's plan. Krishna himself knocked off a few demons, Shishupal and others, but there were so many. The world was overburdened with the unnecessary defense force of kings who were actually demonic, but were posing as the royal order. So rather than knock them off a few at a time, Krishna arranged Kurukshetra, and so many were killed. So that was Krishna's plan, and this was a necessary constituent of the plan. He didn't have to do much to get Duryodhana angry and resentful and envious. He was already of that mindset. But here, this is going to contribute to the Kurukshetra war.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Something else?
It's mind-boggling when the Duryodhana, the person, it's quite mind-boggling that Duryodhana, the personified envy, has been put in charge of treasury, knowing that what they have, Pandavas have gone through. So it's a bit. I mean, can you explain more on that?
Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Okay. Everybody has some particular expertise. They may be envious, or they may be of a irritable nature. But still, they have some good, some capability. So that's the art of management, to find out who's capable. Karna also had his shortcomings, but he was not charitable like anything. So he was put in charge of the charity department. That's also the broad-mindedness of someone like Yudhisthira Maharaj. It's said that a saintly person sees the good qualities in others. Srila Prabhupada was like that. He could have, if he just focused on our faults, none of us would have escaped whipping. We all would have been tossed out on our ears. Maybe some very few exceptions. But Prabhupada pulled out the good qualities. So you're in charge of this, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of that. And sometimes we messed up, and sometimes he would have to move us on out of whatever responsibility. But generally, he tried to see where everyone could be engaged for the satisfaction of Krishna. So Yudhisthira Maharaj also, he's the king, he's expert in administration. So he saw that everybody can be engaged here. That's also good. Idle mind is a devil's workshop. If we take such persons and leave them unengaged, then we're off. Then we're in worse straits. They'll just stay home and grumble and be venomous. This way, everybody has a part. Everyone's contributing, and everyone's ability to contribute is recognized. So, Duryodhana also, sometimes he's called Suryodhana. He had some good qualities. Even Balaram liked him. Something. At least that good quality he had, that Balaram liked him. But still, he's meant for destruction, as we'll find. But Yudhisthira Maharaj gave him some responsibility. I can think of so many examples in our ISKCON movement of people Prabhupada engaged who had some pretty far out qualities, but Prabhupada engaged them productively in doing wonderful things. Prabhupada told the story one time, more than once, but he told it once in my presence. He said that there's a man who's walking and he sees a stick. He says, "Is it a very important thing, a stick?" No, Srila Prabhupada. And then he's walking and he sees one gourd. Is it a very valuable thing? No, Srila Prabhupada. And he's walking and he sees on the road one wire. He says, "Is it a very useful thing?" No, Srila Prabhupada. He said, but an intelligent person attaches the stick to the gourd and strings the wire and makes a nice musical instrument. Prabhupada says, similarly, I have gathered all you American and European boys and girls. Krishna's taking the most humble position, washing the feet of He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Ganges is washing his lotus feet, but he's taking the position of washing the feet of the guests. How wonderful Krishna is.
Right. It's really good example you've given how we should engage people and see their good qualities. And sometimes they make mess of it. What happens then?
What happens when they make a mess of it?
Yeah, how can you rectify it, literally?
Well, Srila Prabhupada used to, sometimes they say, that if you want milk from the cow, you tolerate the kicks. You milk the cow, but the cow's going to kick, but you get the milk. So sometimes Prabhupada just tolerated. He saw that what can be done, and he wouldn't say anything, just let it go on, leave it in Krishna's hands. Or sometimes he would try to rectify the person or train the person that it's not like this, like this. Put a lot of energy into training his people, GBC men, sannyasis, temple leaders, other devotees. He didn't like just pulling people out and replacing them. That wasn't Prabhupada's. He said we should rectify, not replace or toss people out. He would, all right, rectify. And he was quite, sometimes his leaders would object, that how can this man be? Sometimes some of his very expert men would be almost disasters in other regards. They'd be very good in business, or they'd be very good in leading something or other, but they'd be quarrelsome or wouldn't get along with others. And still Prabhupada would engage them and take what they could contribute. And I could name names, but it wouldn't be appropriate. But Prabhupada engaged us. And that's the quality of a great soul. He looks for the good qualities and magnifies that. Otherwise, there will always be some discrepancy. There'll be no end to it. But Prabhupada's philosophy was to magnify the good quality, and then that would, what can you say? assume greater importance than the mistakes. Lord Ram, yes. Krishna Krishna, hey. Krishna Krishna. Krishna. Lord Ramchandra also did that. He had quite a strange batch of associates helping him, but he engaged them.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. This one. Maharaj, sometimes it's said that one should not try to understand what the Vaishnava does, and one should not try to ascertain his activities, or one can't understand his activities. But at the same time, we say one should be a first-class servant.
One should
try to be a first-class servant to his spiritual master, and then you do the things before he asks you to do the things. So how can one assess it?
How can one assess what the spiritual master or the advanced devotee is thinking if no one can understand the mind? Yeah, it doesn't say one shouldn't, but one can never fully understand the mind of a Vaishnava. One can never fully understand, but that doesn't mean that we can't understand anything. To some extent, we can understand. Prabhupada would want his massage at a certain time. You don't have to be a mystic to figure out that, at this time he wants this, at this time now he wants another chapati. It's not like deeply confidential knowledge. Something else. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Hare
Krishna Maharaj, I wanted to ask, we get to hear about how we should surrender to Krishna.
You're probably clicked off.
Huh?
We're not getting any
Hare
benefit.
Krishna.
Nope.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Now you're good.
Okay, Hare Krishna. So we always hear how we should surrender to Krishna, but what is surrendering to Krishna?
What is surrender to Krishna? That's described. Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjana. Surrender is not just a sentimental thing. I surrender. But first thing is, anukulyasya sankalpa. One should accept whatever is favorable for the service of Krishna. Anukul means favorable. Just like Arjuna, he didn't want to fight, but when he understood that it's what Krishna wanted, then karishe vachanam tava, then I'll do it. So I may like it or not like it, but if it's favorable, let me do it. And pratikulyasya varjanam. What's unfavorable, let me reject. This is what the mind does. It accepts and rejects. But the intelligent person should accept what's favorable and reject what's unfavorable. What is that next? Rakshasya titi vishvasha. To think that Krishna will protect me. Gokritve varanam tata, and Krishna will maintain me. Just as Prabhupada, he came to America, he had no money, he had no contacts, no big money waiting for him. Really just went. But he was confident, Krishna will maintain me, Krishna will protect me. And go pritve rananam tata. Then, yeah. Go. Now we have to find the ranam. Atma nikshepa karpanya. To be very humble and meek. These are qualifications of or aspects of surrender. So Srila Prabhupada speaks about a surrendering process. Sometimes they have these great religious meetings, and there's a fired up sermon, and then the preacher calls for people to surrender and give their lives. Who will come up and surrender his life? And maybe some people are so moved by the event that they come and they surrender. From this day on, I'm yours. And maybe that lasts for a few days, but then sort of things go back to what they were. So that kind of surrender, a sort of sentimental surrender, will be hard to sustain. But there's a process to cultivate. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilina. Favorable cultivation of Krishna consciousness. So there's a program, Prabhupada would say scientific, methodical program for cultivating Krishna consciousness. So that's a surrendering process. Is that okay? Okay. Yes.
Haribol. Maharaj, when Arjuna asks how the mind can be controlled, and Krishna says by constant practice and detachment, and I was just wondering, what does that look like ideally and practically in our everyday life?
What does that look like? What is that in the Bhagavad Gita? That asamshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam abhyasena tu konteya vairagyena jagrite. It's a fact that the mind is fickle and unsteady and always stubborn and obstinate. And that controlling it is like trying to control the wind. But it's possible. Abhyasena tu konteya, by practice. And it's very interesting. Srila Prabhupada in his translation says suitable practice. If you take some unsuitable practice, you'll get an unsuitable result. It won't work. If you take up, the austerities of Satya Yuga, and try to stay submerged in the water in the winter with only your chin up, above, that's not suitable practice. In a previous age, maybe, but not now. So now the suitable practice is Harinam. Harinam, 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 Eva Kemanam. Kalo Nastyeva, Nastyeva, Nastyeva. Kathiranyata. That's suitable practice. And detachment. Not to accept more than necessary. And whatever we accept, to think that this is for Krishna. So what does it look like? It looks like the Krishna consciousness movement. Devotees going out chanting, devotees going out distributing books, devotees sacrificing for the pleasure of Krishna. Is that okay? something else.
Haribol.
Yes.
So yesterday in class, in the Srimad Bhagavatam class, Sarvabhauma Prabhu, he said that bhakti means softening our hearts.
Means
Softening our hearts.
suffering our
Softening.
softening our hearts.
Softening, sorry. So much so that it becomes like butter. And then Krishna being the...
Becomes
like butter.
like butter.
Yes. And then Krishna being the butter thief will steal our hearts.
Oh, that's very nice.
So I was wondering, in various talks that we had, we spoke a lot about the detachment factor, tolerance, self-analyzation, living from the intelligence. Sometimes I feel when we apply these things, it makes our heart harder instead of softer.
Too much austerity, too much of all of that will make the heart hard. If we just go for austerity, and especially extreme austerity, the heart can become hard. But then, in the name of soft-heartedness, well, 4:30 in the morning, that's just too much. 16 rounds, that's 2 hours. I don't want my heart to become hard. I want to be nice and soft and fuzzy. So, on the one side, these austerities are good for us. The heart, you have a nice soft heart full of intoxicants and other forbidden things. Better to be hard-hearted. But we need to remember, why am I doing these things? It's for Krishna. It's not just to be austere. It's not just to be strong and resolute. But we want to love Krishna. Prabhupada one time said, we should never forget our real business, which is to become mad after Krishna. So that's there. That we need to remember Krishna. Then the austerity becomes a pleasure. Devotees are carrying so many books, they're knocking on doors, they're facing so many no, not interested people. But they're feeling, they don't become hard-hearted. They become more soft-hearted because they're thinking of Krishna, they're thinking of spiritual master, they're thinking of people's welfare. So, if these things were unfavorable, following 4 regulative principles, chanting 16 rounds, getting up early in the morning, then the Acharya wouldn't have recommended them. He would say, well, these rules are there, but they're just going to make your heart into iron. So you don't want to do that. Better to take it easy. If that's what was going to help us, that's what he would have recommended. So these austerities that are recommended will help. But we should remember that our real business is to be attracted to Krishna. And part of our, why are we getting up early in the morning? We're going to see Krishna Balaram. We're going to worship Tulsi. We're going to see Krishna Balaram. We're going to chant Hare Krishna with the devotees. These things soften the heart.
Sometimes in a relationship with devotees, when we really think of the welfare of the soul, the comments or the advice that we might give seems detached or seems hard because it is maybe cutting. It's like what they need to hear and not what they want to hear.
That's soft-heartedness. It's not that the doctor who goes around jabbing little kids in the butt, is hard-hearted. He's soft-hearted. He knows that they're in a malaria zone or a yellow fever zone or whatever it is, and this will help them. So it may seem that he's cruel, but it's not so. He's compassionate.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. My question
You're
is,
switched off, perhaps.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, if any of the service increase our mode of passion, what should we do?
I couldn't hear.
Any service increase our passion, what should we do?
Mode of passion.
Yeah, I got mode of passion, but
If any service increases,
well, seva in the mode of passion, that doesn't mean that we should give up the seva. This seva is in the mode of passion, so better to do nothing. That won't help us. We can try to free ourselves from passion, ignorance. The seva will help us. There are devotees who, they take some service and they do it passionately. I mean, too passionately. But by doing it, they become purified. They please Krishna. So that's better than to be the nice person, calm, quiet, mode of goodness, and doing nothing.
but Maharaj, as we were talking that bhakti, if we are doing bhakti, our heart becomes like so soft that
If we're doing bhakti, the heart becomes
soft.
soft.
But that service, I'm feeling like my heart was earlier it was soft, but it's becoming harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is that in the second canto? The heart is steel framed. If in spite of chanting the holy name, one doesn't experience tears from the eyes, shivering in the body. In that connection, Srila Prabhupada discusses 10 kinds of offenses. We should chant, but we should try to avoid 10 kinds of offenses while chanting. Apart from that, sometimes in the beginning there's a sort of sentimental softness. But it doesn't last, or the Krishna consciousness doesn't last. Sometimes people come and they're in ecstasy and they're crying and they're just, really carried away by love. And then, a few weeks later, they're gone. Prabhupada said one time, first to cry, first to dry. So we have to see not just the outward signs of love or softness, but the commitment to the service of Krishna. How this person has given his life for the service of Krishna. I can think of some of my godbrothers, they're like tough dudes, really tough people, but they're so dedicated to Prabhupada, giving their lives for serving Prabhupada. That's love. I told that story, I think, the other night that I heard from Shrutakirti. Did I tell that? Shrutakirti Prabhu told this story in Ujjain, that the devotees, he's traveling with Srila Prabhupada, and wherever he's going, the devotees have so much love for Prabhupada. And Shrutakirti's massaging Prabhupada, and one day he had the bravery to say to Srila Prabhupada, I don't feel that kind of love. for you. Prabhupada didn't say anything. And then later, that day, I think he said, do you like this? Do you like your service? And Sridhar said, oh yes, Srila Prabhupada, I love it. I'm so happy doing this service. And then I think it was the next day, Prabhupada said, the love is shown by service. There's a purport in Nectar of Instruction where Srila Prabhupada says that Krishna consciousness is not imaginative ecstasy. Or what was the other word? Speculative. Can find it. Rautatious. It's not sentimental speculation or imaginative ecstasy, but its essence is practical activity in the service of the Lord. And then Prabhupada said, that's love. That you're serving me, that's love. It's not the show of sentiment. And we saw that in Prabhupada's life also. I think that story is there told by Guru Das Prabhu about the first time he came to Vrindavan with Srila Prabhupada. They're driving in a car from Delhi, and this is Guru Das's first time, and he's thinking, wow, we're going to Vrindavan, and it's Krishna's place, and what is Srila Prabhupada thinking? And, yes. And Prabhupada didn't say anything. The whole ride, he was silent. And then Prabhupada said, cement. We have to get cement. It was, because he wanted to build the Krishna Balaram temple, and it was hard to get cement in those days. It was rationed or something. We have to get cement. He wasn't talking about Nikunji, Ratika, cement. This is love. We want to render service to Krishna Balaram. So that's love.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Maharaj, should we confirm our service from our Guru Maharaj?
As far as possible.
If possible.
Yes.
On the topic of love and soft-heartedness, in the chapter, there was one particular paragraph I noted. It was quite sweet. It said that this Rajasuya yajna was an ocean of opulent desire.
Yeah.
I think that was the phrase used, and it said that no ordinary man can cross such an ocean. But in the previous chapter, it was described how Yudhisthira was doing all of this to establish the supremacy of Krishna in this world. And if you want to comment on that nature, but also my question is if you have some thoughts on how exactly this establishes the supremacy of Krishna I suppose the Agrupa
Prabhupada explained that he wanted to invite all the demigods and great persons and so on, and in their presence establish
I see.
the position of Krishna.
But then in terms of, thank you for that, in terms of this yajna being an ocean of opulent desire and our services, I think Chitralekha Devi's question about, hard-heartedness, and sometimes these different practices can lead to that. So it seems like a dangerous line to tread, doing a yajna that is so opulent, it can easily waylay a practitioner who's not qualified or who doesn't have Krishna held in such high regard. I was just curious if you have any thoughts on that, how far our service takes us into the realm of opulent desire, or something that could waylay you if you don't have Krishna at the forefront.
Yeah. Of course, Yudhisthira Maharaj, he had no such desires. It would have been desirable for the ordinary materialist, but it was opulence, but not that he was desiring to enjoy it. So that's one thing. Just like we make the Rath Yatra festival and we have so many decorations and bagpipe bands and flowers and so many big, maybe a Mercedes-Benz car and all of that. It's not for us. It's not for us, it's for Lord Jagannath. So we can use any amount of opulence in the service of Lord Jagannath, in the service of Krishna. And that won't be a problem for us. But as soon as we think that I could enjoy this, then it's a problem. And Prabhupada, he spoke about Gaudiya Math, where they built an opulent temple, and then the men were thinking, this room, this room, this room, which room they could occupy. So one does have to be careful. One does have to be careful. Yes.
Speaking about opulence, it reminds me of how Srila Prabhupada instructed us to worship the deities in the Ashvarya mood, full of opulence.
Yeah.
It was a statement I
wanted.
wanted.
Just as you're saying that, it reminded me, we dress Krishna so opulently, so gorgeously. If any of us tried to dress that way, it would just be a joke.
What?
What about the servant of the king enjoys the opulence of the king?
According to his tiny size.
Oh, okay. And I had a question. And the question is, I was just reading Canto 4, and that is about the teachings of King Prithu. So, one of the things he said is he's speaking, for instance, about the Vaishnava apparatus and the Guru apparatus. And then if you do that, then you're kind of hopeless in spiritual life. But on the other hand, we have this Bhagavad Gita verse, I forgot. Krishna says, my devotee will never perish. So it seems a little bit contradictory, but it isn't. So can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
I lost the train there.
No. So on the one hand, it is said that Vaishnava apparat, be careful, okay? Guru apparat, because it makes your life spiritually really hopeless. But in the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated
nothing's ever lost.
That Krishna says, my devotee will never perish. So can you elaborate a little bit on
devotee will never perish,
yes.
But we can come very close by Vaishnava apparats. Or over the edge. It said that as there's the Shreya Kareva Chandrika Vitaranam, the waxing moon of blessings, there's also the waning moon. If we commit Vaishnava aparats, our devotional moon can become smaller and smaller, finally become the dark moon. We should be careful.
Thank you. Because in general, this question.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. When there are events and functions with devotees, particularly in terms of organization.
A little louder, please.
When there are events and functions with devotees, everyone might have different preferences. So, what should our attitude be in this situation?
Well, if you have a duty, follow the duty. If you don't have a duty, follow your preference. Duty takes precedence. Then, once your duties are taken care of, you can follow your preference. That's all right. Preference means for serving in a certain way. It's a little spontaneous. Someone, I'd like to do this. I'd like to do that. Great. Jump in. Yes, there was some.
Maharaj, we see like with devotion, bhakti, gyan and vairagya comes automatically. Does it happen other way around also with that gyan and vairagya will?
No. Gyan and vairagya don't lead to bhakti. You can cultivate gyan for 60,000 years and still have no bhakti. You can be the greatest vairagi and still have no bhakti. Bhakti doesn't come from gyan or vairagya. Bhakti comes from bhakti.
Maharaj, you were speaking about service. I believe when we're chanting the holy name, we're praying to be engaged in service. Can we pray to be engaged in a specific service, or is it just whatever?
No, if you want to be engaged in some particular service, you can pray for that. Why not? Yeah. Only by the mercy of you. What about Bahunam Janmanamante Gyanavan? After many, many lives of cultivating knowledge, one surrenders to me. By the mercy of a devotee.
It's not, yeah.
Not just by cultivating Gyan. One needs the mercy of a devotee. Nasadhyati mam yoga. That's. But there's another verse also. There's a particular verse I'm forgetting, but not by Tapasya, not by. That's also good, without getting the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotee on one's head. One can't get devotional service.
That's the dust of the lotus feet.
Oh, yes.
Hare Krishna. We just spoke about the Vaishnava etiquette.
Vaishnava?
Etiquette. Etiquette.
Etiquette.
I need to work on my English, I believe. So it seems to be easy to stick with the etiquette when there's space between you and the other person, or when the other person has a particular position. But what about when you're friends? It seems that then it's much harder to keep that etiquette alive.
Well, we think of etiquette as the tendencies to think of etiquette as something sort of stiff, something that has to do with rule books and all of that, But Vaishnavachar, the proper activity for a Vaishnav, is not just rule books, but it's a culture. And so the culture includes things like affection. It's not just when they do this, you do this. When they do this, you say that. When the queen enters, then everybody bows down. And the first time you speak to her, you call her ma'am and all of that. It's not rule bookish. there are rules, but especially among friends, among equals. Then there's also, we can say, culture. What kind of person is a Vaishnava? Vaishnav's soft-hearted, Vaishnav's friendly, Vaishnavs are affectionate, Vaishnavs are have a concern for the welfare of others. So those things are part of how a Vaishnava behaves. It's not just a question of rules, especially when we're with friends. When we're with superiors, then the rules become more important. Even when we're with juniors, there's ways to do things, ways not to do things. But there's affection and love between friends. Priti. Anukulyasya, not anukulyasya. That dadati pratigranati kuyamakyati. These are dealings among friends or among devotees and among devotees. So it's not just, I read in the Nectar of Devotion that I'm supposed to give you something to eat to satisfy your so that you'll give your blessings. But there's genuine, even, we were discussing the other day that a sort of people bow down, can you give your blessings? And it's like no context to it. There's not, can I do some service for you? Or is there some, there's no relationship. There's no just, could you give your blessings? Yes. Ayushman Bhava. But when there's a relationship, then the superior is inclined to give blessings. What is that? Vetatvam somya tat sarvam tat patas tadanugrad. Guru snigdasya shishasya gurave gurumapyata. The Sutta Goswami was addressed by the sages that you're, because of your mild and gentle nature, your spiritual masters have bestowed upon you all of the blessings reserved for a submissive disciple. So it's not just a rule book, but it's also, there is affection and love. Prabhupada told and gave that instruction to Satsuru Maharaj in the early days, 1967. Satsuru Maharaj was typing for Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would give him some stack of manuscript, and Satsuru Maharaj would type it for him. And one day, he came and gave the manuscript, gave the typed copies, and Prabhupada said, "This is not mechanical." He said, "If you love me, I'll love you." So that genuine affection for the devotee or the spiritual master, and that's part of not being hard-hearted, where it's not just mechanical, the association of devotees, but there's affection. We want to have love for Krishna, but it's easier to start with the devotees. They're here. Okay. Let me see to a couple of housekeeping matters. We'll continue tomorrow in the same venue at the same time. If you have any thoughts about the environment, whether it's too hot or too cold or something, You can say something to me or Radhesha. Try to take it into account. We do have copies again of my book, Vanity Karma. They're not easily found in India, but here they are. And the price is whatever you want to give. Are we missing anything else? Oh, I'm supposed to give Srimad Bhagavatam class tomorrow morning. Esoteric knowledge. Okay, and take some prasadam as you're leaving. Be sure to take some prasadam. And we're giving you a whole laddu as you leave. And who's leading kirtan? Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Yes. You don't need any, just sing. Just clap your hands and sing.
Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Jai Om Vishnubad Panumansa Pariprajaka Ashto Tirasri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Shamiraj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nama Charja Shridharidas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Sham Mukund Radha Kunikiti Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Tham Ki Jai Navadip Tham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamana Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Yadibo. Okay.
Sorry, Mike, I wasn't quick-witted enough to realize I could just click record my memory. I really like the tune. I really like the tune.
Yeah, it was
And
very nice.
sometimes if I see what it is, it helps me remember it. And I could have just clicked record. I'm sorry for breaking it. Yeah, I know. I was clicking the keys. I was clicking the harmonium keys so I could see pictures and remember.